For the last 50 years, it has been nearly impossible to create a new country. Now, thanks to new technologies, it is once again possible. We'll explain, but first, let's talk about why we might want to.
We want to be able to peacefully start a new country for the same reason we want a bare plot of earth, a blank sheet of paper, an empty text buffer, a fresh startup, or a clean slate. Because we want to build something new without historical constraint. The financial demand for a clean slate is clear. People buy millions of acres of vacant land and incorporate hundreds of thousands of new companies each year, spending billions just to get that fresh start. And now that it is possible to start not just new companies, but new communities and even new currencies, we see people flocking to create those as well. The societal value of a clean slate is also clear. In the technology sector alone, the ability to form new companies has created literally trillions of dollars in wealth over the past few decades. Indeed, if we imagine a world where you couldn't just obtain a blank sheet of paper, but had to erase an older one, where you couldn't just acquire bare land but had to knock down a standing building, where you couldn't just create a new company but had to reform an existing firm, we imagine endless conflict over scarce resources. Perhaps we don't have to think too hard to imagine this world. It resembles our own. In the distant past, people could only write on clay tablets. In the recent past, such as Mao's China or the USSR, they were executed for contemplating entrepreneurship. And in the immediate present in San Francisco, they are arguing over replacing an ancient gas station. In these times and places, making a fresh start was technologically infeasible, politically impossible, or judicially punishable. And that's where we are today with countries, with cities, with nations, with governments, and with much of the physical world. Because the brand new is unthinkable, we fight over the old. But perhaps we can change that. How to start a new country.
Hey guys, I'm Drew. I turn the most important articles on Bitcoin into documentaries so more people can learn from them. This video was based on How to Start a New Country, written and narrated by Balaji Srinivasan.
Number 1, election. The most conventional way to start a new country involves winning sufficient power in an election to either A, rewrite the laws of an existing state, or B, carve out a new one from scratch with the consent of the international community. This is the most widely discussed path, and by far the most crowded. Many people care about this avenue, perhaps too many. Number 2, revolution. The second obvious way to start a new country is to carry off a political revolution. We don't advise attempting this. Particularly momentous elections are sometimes referred to as revolutions, though a revolution frequently involves bloodshed. Revolutions are infrequent, but everyone knows that they mean a new government. Number 3, war. The third conventional way to start a new country is to win a war. We don't advise attempting this either. A war is, of course, not independent from the other two methods. Indeed, both elections and revolutions can lead to wars that end up carving out new polities. Like a revolution, a war is infrequent and undesirable, but again is widely known as a means by which national borders may be rewritten. Number 4, micronations. Now we get to the unconventional. The most obvious of the unconventional approaches, and the one most people think of when they hear the concept of starting a new country, occurs when an eccentric plants a flag on an offshore platform or disputed patch of dirt and declares themselves king of nothing. If the issue with elections is that too many people care about them, the issue with these so-called micronations is that too few people care. Because a state, like a currency, is an inherently social affair, a few people in the middle of nowhere won't be able to organize a military, enforce laws, or be recognized by other nations. Moreover, while an existing state may be content to let people harmlessly LARP a fake country in their backyard, an actual threat to sovereignty typically produces a response with real guns, whether that be the Falklands or Sakhalin. Number 5, seasteading. Here we start to get interesting. Conceived by Patrick Friedman and backed by Peter Thiel, seasteading essentially starts with the observation that cruise ships exist and asks whether we could move from a few weeks on the water at a time to semi-permanent habitation on international waters, with frequent docking, of course. As the cost of cruise ships has fallen recently, this approach is becoming more feasible, but we haven't yet seen a working example. Number 6, space. Perhaps the most prestigious of the start a new country paths is the idea of colonizing other planets. Unlike seasteading or micronations, space exploration started at the government level and has been glamorized in many movies and TV shows, so it enjoys a higher degree of social acceptability. People mainly think of it as currently technically infeasible, rather than outright crazy. Elon Musk's SpaceX is one entity seriously contemplating the logistics of starting a new state on Mars. Number 7, cloud countries. And finally we arrive at our preferred method, the cloud country. Our idea is to proceed cloud first, land last. Rather than starting with the physical territory, we start with the digital community. We recruit online for a group of people interested in founding a new virtual social network, a new city, and eventually a new country. We build the embryonic state as an open source project. We organize our internal economy around remote work. We cultivate in-person levels of civility. We simulate architecture in VR, and we create art and literature that reflects our values. Over time, we eventually crowdfund territory in the real world, but not necessarily contiguous territory. Because an underappreciated fact is that the internet allows us to network enclaves. Put another way, a cloud community need not acquire all its territory in one place at one time. It can connect 1,000 apartments, 100 houses, and a dozen cul-de-sacs in different cities into a new kind of fractal polity with its capital in the cloud. Over time, community members migrate between these enclaves and crowdfund territory nearby, with every individual dwelling and group house presenting an independent opportunity for expansion. What we've described thus far is much like the concept of ethnic diasporas, which are internationally dispersed, but connected by communication channels with each other and the motherland. The twist is that our version is a reverse diaspora, a community that forms first on the internet, builds a culture online, and only then comes together in person to build dwellings and structures. In a sense, you can think of each physical outpost of this digital community as a cloud embassy, similar to the grassroots Bitcoin embassies that have arisen around the world. New recruits can come to either the virtual or physical environment, beta test it, and decide to leave or stay. Minimum necessary innovation. Let's pause and summarize for a second. The main difference between the 7th method, cloud countries, and the previous 6, election, revolution, war, micronation, seasteading, and space, is that it straddles the boundary of practicality and impracticality. No one can claim that it's infeasible to build million-person online communities or billion-dollar digital currencies, or that it's physically impossible to architect buildings in VR and then crowdfund them. The cloud country concept just requires stacking together many existing technologies, rather than inventing new ones, like Mars-capable rockets or permanent habitation seasteads. Yet at the same time, it avoids the obvious pathways of election, revolution, and war, all of which are ugly and none of which provide much venue for individual initiative. In other words, the cloud country concept takes the most robust existing tech stack we have, namely the suite of technologies built around the internet, to route around political roadblocks without waiting for future physical innovation. What counts as a new country? Having outlined these 7 methods, the careful reader will notice that we played a bit fast and loose with the definition of what a new country is. First, what do we mean by a new country? One definition is that starting a new country means settling a wholly new territory, like colonizing Mars. Another definition is that simply changing the form of government actually changes the country, like going from the Second French Republic to the Second French Empire. Rather than using either this strict or loose definition, we will use both numerical and societal definitions of a new country. The numerical definition begins with visualizing a nationrealestatepop.com site, similar to coinmarketcap.com, where the number of cloud country members, the acreage of real estate owned by those members, and the on-chain GDP of each cloud country are tracked in real time. Eventually, a cloud country of 5 million people worldwide, with thousands of square miles of discontiguous, community-owned land and billions in annual income, will demand recognition. This in turn leads us to the societal definition. A new country is a new member of the United Nations, one that is internationally recognized by other countries as a legitimate polity capable of self-determination. This combination of absolute and relative metrics matches the emergence of cryptocurrency. Initially ignored and then mocked as an obvious failure, within 5 years after its invention, Bitcoin attained $1 billion market capitalization, a numerical success, and was subsequently listed on CNBC and Bloomberg alongside blue chip stocks, a form of societal recognition. At each step, Bitcoin could keep ascending numerically on its own, with greater societal recognition following in its wake. And by 2020, it had changed the trajectory of the People's Bank of China, the IMF, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and the World Bank. Cryptocurrency was able to achieve these heights because money has both technical and political aspects. The numbers could be piled up before the societal accolades followed. Once Bitcoin had proven that it couldn't be easily counterfeited or hacked, the shared belief of the tens of millions of cryptocurrency holders worldwide was enough to get BTC from a market cap of 0 to a market cap of $1 trillion plus, and from there to a listing on every Bloomberg terminal. Could a sufficiently robust cloud country with, say, 1 to 10 million committed digital citizens, provable cryptocurrency reserves, and physical real estate all over the earth similarly achieve societal recognition from the United Nations? A cloud country with a population of this size would actually fit right in the middle of the pack globally, as out of the 193 UN-recognized sovereign states, approximately 20% of existing countries have a population of less than 1 million, and 55% have a population of less than 10 million. This includes many countries people typically think of as, quote, real, like Luxembourg, 615,000, Cyprus, 1.18 million, Estonia, 1.3 million citizens, New Zealand, 4.7 million, Ireland, 4.8 million, Singapore, 5.8 million, and so on. These user counts are surprisingly small numbers by tech standards. Of course, mere quantity isn't everything. The strength of affiliation to our hypothetical cloud country matters, as does the time spent on the property, the percentage of net worth stored in the currency, and the fraction of contacts found in the community. Still, once you remember that Facebook has 3 billion users, Twitter has 300 million users, and many individual influencers have more than 1 million followers, it starts to be not too crazy to imagine that we can build a 1 to 10 million person social network with a genuine sense of national consciousness, an integrated cryptocurrency, and a plan to crowdfund many discontiguous pieces of territory around the world. With the internet, we can digitally sew these disjoint enclaves together into a new kind of polity, a network state. The next step is to describe exactly how we might go about this.
Hey guys, Drew again. If you like this video, subscribing really helps out. Let me know if you want me to make more videos like this. Thanks everyone.